Awesome.
Hi, Annie. I'm so happy
Hi,
to see
Molly.
you.
You too. This is
Nice.
great.
When did we last see each other? Last year?
Must have been last
Time
year. Yeah.
time is it could be 20 years given this year. Am I right?
Yeah. We're in a warp.
I want to introduce everybody. This is Annie Grace. She is the author of This Naked Mind and the Alcohol Experiment. We are gonna talk about you and I have so many, I have so many things that I want to talk to you about today. Because I love so many of things that you talk about. I have so many questions about the things that you talk about. And I want us to really make sure we get to the core of what this podcast is about, which is really like what we're craving underneath all of it. Right. So you and I are nerdy scientists, but I want to make sure we make a note right here, right now, that we go below the science today and try to really get to the bottom of things. But why don't you just give us a little like bitsy on you? What do we need to know about you?
Awesome. So I'm a mother of 3 now. I live in Colorado, and I was an executive for the better part of a decade. And actually, my story is all about alcohol because I didn't really drink much in college. I moved to New York City at the age of 26, and I was told by my boss, like, hey, you got to show up at happy hour. And I was like, why? I don't really drink. He's like, that's not about that. It's about this is where the deals are done. This is where your ideas get showcased. This is where you network. This is really important for your career. So I was like, okay. So I made a whole method. I had a glass of wine, then a pint of water, and I was drinking wine because it had the fewest calories. And I was like so methodical about it, but so intent on, okay, I'm going to show up, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to get it right. And, didn't realize that it was addictive. And so the long and short of it is, fast forward a decade, I now had 2 of my 3 kids. I was drinking close to 2 bottles of wine every single night. I'd actually stopped drinking bottles because it was so painful to go through that first bottle, realize you're the only one drinking and you hadn't had what you would consider enough. So you're opening the second. So I switched to box wine.
Oh,
And
I was going to say you switched to magnums. That's what I did.
oh yeah, there you go. Exactly.
So we're friends for lots of reasons, but there's one of them. Oh, that's such a great idea. Box instead of okay, good point of information. So you switched over to boxes of wine. Switched over to boxes of wine, and then what happened?
So there was just all of these little moments. And I consider myself really lucky that the little moments didn't turn into big moments in my journey. But I was,
Annie, can I just ask you
conscious
one
aware
question?
enough.
When you were 26 and you were at the bar and you were doing this methodical drinking, did you know that, I don't know, did you have feelings about it? Did you have thoughts or feelings about it? Like positive, negative?
So I grew up in, I mean, I have a unique story of how I grew up. I grew up in this tiny little 1-room cabin on the backside of a mountain with no running water and no electricity. The reason is because my parents were like the hippiest of the hippies, and they just wanted to live this really pure, off the grid lifestyle.
Did you have
And so they didn't
siblings?
drink. I do. I have 2 brothers.
So it's just like
Yeah.
the 5 of you in a cabin together?
Yes.
I mean, that's a
Little
whole
tiny
other
cabin.
podcast, Annie. I'm
A
obsessed
whole
with
other
this.
podcast. And then even further podcast is how my brother lives today. He's done sort of the same thing. He's like a homesteader.
Really?
So
Where?
carried in Carbondale, Colorado.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
fascinating. Okay, back to your story.
Well, anyway, they just didn't drink. So I didn't have like this cautionary tale where like, a lot of people come to me and they're saying, wow, I can't believe I've fallen into this. I was so dead set against it. I didn't have any of that. But I also didn't have like, alcohol is great because I wasn't seeing my parents drink. So
Right.
I went into it really, I mean, my thoughts and feelings, as funny as it is to admit now, were very much, okay, how do I show up and play this game and not get drunk and be one of those people? Because I'd
Wow.
seen all those, drunk dancing on the bar at the Christmas party. And I knew that. And I was just ambitious. I mean, I was just like a, young master's degree, hungry New York City, wanted to make my mark in the world. And I think part of it is like, although my upbringing was so unique, it was, very, very poor by choice. Like my parents gave up money more or less. And
Right.
it was in Aspen, Colorado. So it was this dichotomy. So I was driven to just have like
Wow.
a real house and
So
pay
you
for it
sort of
myself.
wanted the Aspen that we know of Aspen, and while you were in this mountainside without a bathroom of Aspen. So took off to the
Yeah,
big city.
there was a lot of comparison, like, to my friends, and,
Right.
yeah, and just yeah, I wanted drywall. I mean, like,
Right.
literally, because I wanted to be able to that
Reasonable.
was one of my big goals in life was drywall, because I wanted to be able to hang a poster, and you can't hang it on logs very easily, they kept ripping, and so I just
Right.
thought drywall I mean, it's so silly, but yeah, so I was totally driven, and so my thoughts were, "This is a tool, and I'm gonna figure out how to use this tool so that I can show up and get what I want, but so that I don't become,
Hmm.
embarrass myself."
When
And
did
I
you
mean, at some points
notice?
during
Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, like, at some points during this, like, intentional drinking phase before it really became unintentional, um, I would find myself getting tipsy, feel that dizziness, go into the bathroom to throw up the glass of wine so I could drink another one.
Yeah, boot it up.
Yeah.
That's really, I mean, in the goal of what you were doing, that's a pretty brilliant strategy, I'd like to say.
I mean, I'm very methodical when I approach
Yeah,
things.
no,
I'm
I
like,
hear
"Okay, I
it.
wanna
I
know
hear
all
it.
the details, then I wanna
Yeah.
make a
It's
plan." I
pretty
mean, it's
scientific. You're like, I'm going to get this out, then we're going to move to this. So then when did it turn from methodical to more behaviorally out of control for you?
it's so funny because I try to look back and be like, "When was that moment?" And there are a few turning points that I can pretty clearly trace, but a lot of it is very, very just small, tiny moments. I remember one time walking home, from the subway, and usually I'd go for a run around Fort Greene Park, and I was looking at my running shoes, and then, I had passed a bodega, and I was like, "Oh, that's easier." So I
Mhm.
just went to the bodega and bought a bottle of wine
Yeah.
instead of going for a run. And it was like very, very slowly, all the things I used to do to be a human in the world, all the coping mechanisms I had to
Yeah.
maintain my sanity, to be happy, to not be stressed, to manage myself, sort of like all went the way of, oh, let's have a drink. But then there were other bigger points too, like the birth of my second son. I was really blindsided with very intense postpartum depression.
Oh,
And I started, alcohol really took the edge off of that. And so my drinking, and I think a lot of people have a very similar story
I
of
was
the
just going to ask
point where
that.
you stop using alcohol to socialize. And when you start using it to self-medicate, even if it's self-medicating stress from work,
Mhm.
that point, and scientifically it does work differently in your brain responds differently when it's under stress to things that can break through that stress barrier. And so it was, a lot of people have that story of like, it really took a turn when I got divorced, or when
Mm,
I had a child, or when
right.
my mom died. Stories like that over and
Yeah, it
over.
turns medicinal. It turns medicinal at some point. I relate to that completely. Do you find in your community that postpartum depression story is common?
Yes, I think it's not necessarily like everybody all the time, but there's a lot of women, and especially once I say it, they're like, "Oh my gosh, me too."
Yeah,
I don't
I would
think it's like
imagine.
conscious, but
Yeah.
as soon as somebody says it, we can all sort of say, "Wow, no, that was a big turning point for me as well." And it's combined with the fact that you've just abstained for 9 months. So in your mind, you've proven to yourself, "Oh, I don't have a problem. I
Wow.
can obviously give this up. It's no big deal."
That's
And
really
you've made it the
fascinating.
forbidden fruit. You've been wanting it for the whole 9 months. You're going out to these, events, or even a restaurant, and you're ordering the iced tea and you feel like, oh man, poor me. And
Right.
so like that psychological boomerang is pretty strong.
Hmm. Wow. So we're at 2 boxes of wine, 2 no, we don't do the bottles anymore. We've moved to boxes, and you're recognizing this isn't okay to you. Doesn't feel okay to you.
Yeah.
Then what happens?
Um, so yeah, I'm realizing it doesn't feel okay to me. I do what, any logical person is going to do. And I decide, okay, I'm going to just drink less. I didn't find it easy. And I think it's so fascinating because it's in that moment of, all right, I'm consciously going to make a decision because I think I'm in control, that really can reveal how you're not in control.
Yeah.
And that period of, making rules and breaking them, making promises and breaking them, no drinks till Friday, and then drinking on no drinks till Thursday. Okay, I can make it till Wednesday. Okay, I can do one alcohol-free day a week.
Right.
And making and breaking those rules really awakens this journey of just uh, really losing your trust and faith in yourself,
Yeah.
because you don't get it. You don't understand, well, how does this thing, this like liquid in a glass, like have control over me? I feel so smart and in control in all other areas of my life. Yet this is this strange exception that just doesn't make sense. And
Yeah.
yeah, that was a pretty dark time of me making and breaking these rules.
Well, it really, and in my experience and in the work I do too, it's like it, and we really sacrifice this relationship with ourself. And then that's like the big rebuild, which I can't wait to talk about today. But that's the big rebuild, right? Like the substance is a substance, and we figure that out however we figure it out on any spectrum. And then it's like time to repair with ourselves.
Absolutely. So then I was coming back from London. I had been there for a week without my family, and it had been one of the, I mean, they were all pretty boozy trips, but this was exceptional because we had Australians there too, and it was
Oh yeah.
Australia Day. And so we were
Well,
going
yeah.
crazy.
That tells the whole story. I was with
Right.
Australians and it was Australia Day.
And so we were staying up to like, it was in the middle of the night when everything was on TV in Australia. So we all
Oh,
decided to hole up in somebody's hotel room and watch the festivities and continue to drink. So I went back to my hotel room at probably 4 a.m, still drunk. I had to be in the cab by 7. And so around 6, I roll into the restaurant as soon as it opened, thinking, okay, I just need something to get into my system to help me, I just need to make it home, right? So I ordered some breakfast and I ordered a mimosa. And the waitress
mhm.
said to me, she's like, well, unless you're planning to drink the whole bottle of champagne, I'm not going to open the champagne because no one else is going to be in here for a while wanting one of these. And I was like, oh no, I'd never drink a whole bottle. Haha. And so she's like, but I can give you a screwdriver. And that's, I didn't drink screwdrivers, so I didn't know what it was. And she's like, it's vodka and orange juice. And I was like, in my mind, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, vodka at 7, or I think it was like 6:30 in the morning. Like, this feels like one of these lines that if I
Yeah.
cross this line, what does that say?
Yeah.
And we all do that. We all have these lines. If it's not that
Absolutely.
bad, then I'm okay. But if I cross that line, but I was really desperate. So I said, okay, fine. I just need to get home. And I get to the airport after having a few of those and having had a horrific night. And I'm sitting in the airport and I'm just crying and journaling and wondering what is wrong and why am I bringing the worst of myself back to my family when they really
Mm.
deserve the best of me, and so upset. And I had this just really strange moment of, I have to try something different. What I've been trying for years now, by the way, at this point, isn't working. And
And you're just trying sort of these promises you would make, and then you're
yeah,
just sort of like just sort of this demoralization cycle, which I relate to in so many ways with so many substances. So like you're in good company, love your face. But effectively the method you were trying wasn't the science. It was just the I swear, pinky swear, no, I swear, no, I really swear,
yeah,
no, this time, no,
yeah,
it
no, this
can't,
time's different.
no, like right, like right, like no, but no, I swear this time. Yeah.
Yep, just basically, like, if I can just beat myself up enough or see how far I've fallen, then I
Oh,
really
Annie, my
can.
stomach hurts so much as we're having this conversation. I'm so remembering my own life too. I'm with you. I'm with you on the story.
So, I was in this, moment and of clarity, and it really just came to me that I really needed a different question. I'd been asking this question of, like, "What's wrong with me?" And I was like, "I need to understand why this has changed," because I very vividly remember the time when I didn't even really wanna drink. I didn't wanna go to that happy hour. I didn't have any desire to,
Mm,
and I didn't
mhm.
understand. I was like, "Something's different. What's different?" And so I made myself 2 promises in that moment, and I said, "You know what? I'm gonna give myself a year." And my 2 promises were, I'm gonna just, full on self-compassion, which in effect meant I was gonna stop trying to stop drinking. I was gonna let myself drink, I was gonna but I was gonna stop with the beating myself up and the trying to make rules and breaking rules. That wasn't work. It was so clear that that was
Do
literally
you
again.
know how you came to that? That's like the most beautiful promise I ever heard. Do you know? Can you imagine if we all just made that promise to ourselves, how we would behave today? Like, I don't even know what to say about that. Like podcast over. Like we never even need to have podcasts anymore if we just made that promise. Self-help would be over. Um, do you know how you came to that like how did you come to that thought? Or did it just get dropped in like a download?
I think it was just like, yeah, a divine download or just a moment of something different. I think I was just I think when we get into a moment of just like, okay, I'm ready. I need something different. I'm going to stop trying myself.
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, that's
I do
great.
think
I mean, that's grace. That's a moment of, I mean, what a name you've got there, my friend. But that's a moment of grace. Like that's beautiful. It's just so funny. I think we so often ignore those moments of grace. And I'm so glad you didn't.
Yeah.
for all of us.
And so I said, okay, I'm gonna stop trying to stop drinking, get off that crazy train of making these promises and breaking them. And of course, I didn't know any of the science at the time, but the science is like resoundingly true that self-compassion leads to change. And we think it's beating ourselves up more that leads to change, which is not true.
Sure do.
And then the other promise I made, but I said, if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to let myself off the hook, so to speak, I need to understand why. And so I ended up, my method to this was I got home kind of hopeful, very sick. And really, the first step was I just took it on as like this side project. I was still working full time. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start by making myself a list of all the reasons I drink. And then I started asking my friends all the reasons they drink. And I started to just go through, and it's a beautiful point in history that we live in where you can just go onto Google Scholar and find abstracts for different studies and pay $50 and download the actual study. And I just started to go through all the reasons. Does it really relax me? And then finally,
so you went and found so you wrote all the reasons you drink, and then you basically went and found data to either support it or not support it.
Yeah.
I mean, that is something, Annie.
Is this true? Is this not true? And it was mostly data. It was also inner reflection though, because I would ask myself really good questions like, am I more or less relaxed at this point in my life than I was when I wasn't drinking, or I wasn't drinking as much? If I am numb for 20, 30 minutes or feel slightly better, does that last, or do I feel worse? And I actually started to do things on my own self. Like I would get out of my office, pour a glass of wine, and then time how long it made me feel good. And it was always between 18 and 22 minutes. And then I just had the itch for the next glass of wine because I was feeling that whole sense of like, oh, I need the craving, like it never. And then sometimes I remember literally when I started to get, like, I would say there's two keys to change. It's curiosity and self-compassion.
This is all I want to talk about today. I believe that.
So
I actually believe it's curiosity, compassion, and then a bit of a corrective action plan. I have 3 C's. And I actually am so interested to hear what you think about that, because otherwise we're just stuck in the same pattern, right? Like if we're just like curiosity, compassion, I don't know. As you explain the story, we do have these blind spots that we can't see. And so if we're not sort of looking towards a goal, even if it's just relief, right? Not necessarily abstinence, but relief, then but I'm a behaviorist. So that's my,
no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, when I describe sort of the path to change, I'd say there's really, to change actually the brain, it's 3 key elements: knowledge, emotion, and action. And all 3 of those have to happen.
That's right.
And so, yeah, I think curiosity and self-compassion, curiosity gives you the knowledge, self-compassion creates the emotion, but without the action, you still won't change anything. So I think that's a really good clarification.
But I love this part of the compassion, and I could just talk about this all day in the eating disorder world and in the food addiction world and in the alcohol world and in the gambling world and in the smoking world, as I really want to talk about this idea of so much to learn when we don't follow through, and so much to learn when we go astray, but we end up having such self-abuse and such self-hate that we literally lose the whole thread, and we're stuck in the demoralization, the self-hate, the not enough. And I love this about your program, that it is so rooted in, what's your line about lapsing? It's so good. I forget it.
Is it that you're just doing the best you can with the tools you have, or
but that's a really good
data point?
Yeah, it's just a data point.
It's just a data point.
Tell us about that.
So I like to run things through how does the thought or sentence in your head or label make you feel, and how does it make you behave? Again, back to that knowledge, emotion, and action. And when you have a relapse, if you ask somebody, well, how do you feel? That you like that label, I had a relapse, and people feel awful. They feel all the self-hatred, they feel all the self-loathing.
Well, that word is so incredibly loaded. Can we discuss, like, that word has so much cultural judgment in it, right?
Weakness, something absolutely is wrong with you. All the blame is firmly on the human being,
Right.
not on the substance. And so how does it make you behave? The the what the hell effect tells you that it's going to make you just do more of it. People, when
Yeah.
they feel so bad, I mean, I think part of the spiral of addiction is the pain of doing something, wanting to do less of it, not understanding why you're doing more of it, having that inner battle or that cognitive dissonance, the inner fight. And then that pain, what do you do? What have you been conditioned to do in pain? You've been conditioned to reach for the substance to get
That's
yourself
right.
out of the pain.
Yeah,
And so it just like spirals.
absolutely.
And so the idea with a data point is, if you can look at it as a data point, it's going to give you information. And that information is going to be good because it's going to allow you to make a different decision in the future. Then how does that make you feel? And how does that make you behave? Like,
Yeah.
you're not even necessarily mad that it happened because you see that you can utilize it towards your next evolution, your next stage, right? And so it's just a very different emotion, and hopefully behavior around the label.
Well, I think I want to go back to your story. So you made this promise to yourself, self-compassion for a year, and I'm not going to stop. I'm just going to stop trying to quit drinking. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And then because I want to get to how you got to this program of yours and what you do over there.
So I made myself that big list, and I was, dead set on like, okay, I'm going to give it a year, but I'm going to find the answer. And if if the answer is that alcohol is really the end all be all best thing, and I would be better off drinking than not drinking, then that's fine. Like, I'm going to go with that answer. If the answer is not that I was really at peace with whatever I found, I would like kind of go with that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that ended up changing for me was desire. And I think, we do at the core of it, anything we do over the long term, we have to have a want to in there. Human beings do
Yes.
what they want to do. And so as I started to realize that, wow, that glass of wine isn't actually relaxing me. It's actually, one of the effects of a glass of wine is the body produces cortisol in response, which is a stress hormone. And so you're like, okay, that's not great. It's really hard then to reach for it when you feel stressed because now it's not going to work. So
Yeah,
it's like the
toothpaste is
knowing.
out of the tube. Yeah, that's like the
Yeah,
worst feeling, isn't it? Like you're like,
you're like,
well,
oh
I
my
know how
God.
this is going to make me feel. Because that's my question. Like after you made that decision, in my experience, I stopped drinking in the 12-step frame, which I thought it really was wonderful for me. And I know that's not for everybody. And I feel so lucky for that. But actually, it was really when I put it down, or as I say about sort of, if you want to know why you're eating too much, stop eating too much and you'll know why really quickly, like a lot of the feelings and shame, a lot of the stuff came up then. Did that happen for you? And like, what did you do about it?
Yes, all of the above. So the process really was that I found out all that information. My drinking slowly did reduce. I wasn't tracking it or anything, but it did become harder and harder to drink because I desired it less and less the more I knew. And then eventually I just was like, told my husband, I was like, walked out of my office and said, hey, if you want to get drunk with me again, let's do it tonight. Because after this, I think I'm done drinking. And it was really that just on a dime sort of decision. And then after that, yes, then I think the work starts. I mean, you have the period of really like just feeling so great about the decision because you feel like you're out of this trap and you've seen this train that's going to crash and you're no longer on it. And it's just, you're so thankful. But then you have to learn how to live in the world with other tools. Like, we all just need ways to manage our emotions and manage our thoughts and manage ourselves. And when you've been using a substance as the kind of hammer for everything, looks like a nail, you have to learn that. But I was learning it from a mindset of alcohol is not it. It was making everything worse. And I knew that so definitively that it wasn't an option. Like it wasn't even like I'm not going to do it. That's not an option because I'm afraid of it or because it's bad or anything like that. It was like, I really was 100% congruent with alcohol's not the answer. So what is? So then I started to, go on the journey of picking up different books and learning different things, starting exercise again, really all the things that you need to do, and had a lot of resistance at some points of like, oh my gosh, daily, like every day, like if I don't do these things every day, I'm gonna, feel all anxious and feel all upset and snap at my kids. Like, really? Every day?
And by that, you
And
mean
then
like sort of these acts of self-care, like moving your body, meditating, doing
yes,
some breathing.
your body,
Yeah.
meditating, getting
And
good
Andy, there's
sleep.
never a part in that where you're like, maybe I should just go back to alcohol. The thing I'm actually really curious about, because to me, those studies that talk about the opposite of addiction being connection and how we really need to be connected. I know, to me, the community of any time that I've given up a substance, or decided to stop using a substance, if that's the languaging that you're using, like it's been imperative. Sitting in those circles has been imperative for me. Or some kind of circles, even if it's paying a therapist to sit in those circles or whatever. It's, how did you do that without that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's interesting. That study specifically is interesting because in that study, they offer mice heroin-laced water in Rat Park, or they offer mice heroin-laced water in a cage by themselves.
It's a great
And
TED Talk if anybody wants to look it up.
Yeah, the mice in Rat Park do not get addicted. The mice that are on their own do get addicted. And so I think that's fascinating. I actually was very lucky to
just point of information for everyone listening. What that study says is that the rats who had community and fun and joy and all the things Brene Brown talks about and Annie talks about and I talk about didn't get addicted. The ones that were alone drinking heroin water were like, I need more heroin water. I don't care what you say. Give me more heroin water. It's a great
to the point of death.
To the point of death. To the point of death. Yeah. That's it. Perfect. Yes. So yeah.
But I think the fascinating thing about my journey and my story, and I think, is that I never left Rat Park, right? Like I wasn't ever alone in this anyway. The separation came from drinking. Like I already had, I was going to church. I had a great circle of friends. I had, my family is very close. And so the separation that I felt in my life came from me being the one drinking and escaping into drinking. And so stopping drinking actually reconnected me with all of the things that I was intentionally separating myself from.
For those people who are struggling and don't have that, do you think that the community aspect is as imperative as I do? Vital.
Absolutely.
Vital.
Yeah.
Me too.
Absolutely. And I think there's lots of different ways we can do it, even during these times. Like, I feel very close to you right now. We're speaking over Zoom from thousands of miles away. And I think that there are different ways that we can be connected and be creative about it. We do have to put intention behind it though, because it doesn't just happen. And I think people think that about a lot of stuff, that, you're just going to stumble into friendships, or you're going to stumble into that great, like you have to be intentional about it and choose it for yourself.
So can you sort of synthesize how your methodology in Naked Mind is different than other methodologies with struggling with a substance? Well, alcohol is a substance.
Yeah, for sure. So, and it's interesting because I wrote, so just to finish off the story really fast.
That's when you're talking to like a really good friend, when you can't finish the story. You know what I mean? That's like actually how I define really good friends, is when you actually can't get a story down. So anyway,
so fun.
Keep going.
So I had all of this notes, and I'd been doing a lot of, I was flying a lot for my job at the time internationally. And so I'd been doing a lot of this research on these really long plane flights, and I had all these notes written, typed. I was always typing. And so when I stopped drinking, very quickly, within weeks, I was like, I should just like polish this up and put it online, because people need to know this information.
And this information being when you focus on what you want versus what you don't want, this is a more helpful, effective method of change.
Primarily, here's the reason I was drinking. Here's the evidence why it is not really effective. That was the most of the information. And then, my own journaling through that. And I kind of made it a little more coherent and whatnot. And so it was kind of the very roughest draft of the book, even though I didn't really at the time even necessarily intend for it to be a book. Because I was working, I was doing my job. This is really just like my own journey to
Just your
free
little side
myself.
hustle. Yeah.
Yeah,
Little side hustle to try to get healthy that turned into but that's the divinity of it all, isn't it? Like
right.
when side hustles turn like this, that's what, like, I mean, me too. I'm like at camp at 13 and I'm like, get this note from above, like, hey, you need to go do this. I'm like, okay, cool. That's great. And here we are.
That's so awesome. So I put that out, that PDF out, some Reddit groups, some Facebook groups, stuff like that. And it got downloaded. I just put it on a web page. I didn't even have email addresses or any, like I wasn't asking for an email address. I didn't even know how to do that. I didn't care about email addresses. I was just like, this is an outward facing thing. But I had my email address in it. And so 20,000 people downloaded it in 2 weeks. And I started getting emails from people saying like, oh my gosh, this helped me. Like, this is so powerful. And some guy, I think he was actually from Australia, he emailed me and he's like, you should self-publish this as a book. And I was like, oh, you can self-publish books. And so I started looking into Amazon and self-publishing. And about a year after that, I did end up self-publishing This Naked Mind.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where it started. And then I like hired an editor. best and worst thing. When the first pass of like what I thought was a first draft, and then she gave me feedback, I like laid in bed and cried for 3 days.
I could tell stories about this all day. I know. I like gave 4 chapters. I was like, okay, I'm ready to write a book. They're like, oh my God, this is so not how you do it. Writing a book's that could be like our 5th podcast. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. And so through that process, This Naked Mind, like the method was born. And I would say the method is really those 3 key pillars: knowledge, emotion, and action.
Mm-hmm.
And people can come to that in different ways. In This Naked Mind, I ask for no action. I say, hey, keep drinking, read this book. It's all about knowledge and emotion. And the book is, intended to give you the scientific knowledge and then have you explore internally, which is where I think the emotion comes from. Like, is it really working for you? Are you really more present with your kids? Let's find out. Like, are you really, experiencing better sex because of alcohol? Let's, all of these questions. And then at the end of the book, it's like, okay, take some action. The alcohol experiment is exactly the opposite. It's action from day one. It's a 30-day, experiment where you're being alcohol free for 30 days and seeing how it goes. And so it's action first, and then the knowledge and emotion comes. But it's those 3 key pillars. And I don't think it necessarily matters what order you do them in, but I think that those 3 things are the catalyst for change. And I think they can come from any different source. Obviously so many people change so many things, but I think at the crux of it, you have to feel like you want to, you have to like really overcome the mindset that you already have, which is these beliefs like alcohol relaxes me. If you stop drinking and you're stressed and you believe that alcohol is the thing that's going to make it better, you're literally on an alcohol diet for the rest of your life because you're trying to not do something you think provides a benefit. So I'd say at its core, it is stripping away. We don't do things that we don't think provide a benefit, either consciously or subconsciously. And so it's stripping that away. I will say though, addiction is obviously physical and mental. And This Naked Mind is really, I would say 99.9% about the mental aspect.
The psychological,
The physical aspect can be very dangerous with alcohol. And I'm always telling people like, you need to go and work with somebody to medically detox as you're reading the book. But what happens with physical detox is people will go in and out of detox many times and not have any mental aspect to it. And they're like, okay, my physical body isn't addicted anymore. But if your mind still believes that alcohol is the end all be all key substance that's making your life okay.
I mean, you're just talking about diet culture now, Annie, like literally like that is, it's so funny because, we're just all the seats on the Titanic, but that is diet culture 101, right? If I just fix my body, if I just lose the weight, then everything will be okay. And that is just the farthest thing from the truth too, right? It's comprehensive, all of it. And I do love this idea. I always say this thing because as you do, I get a lot of flack about some of my ideas, as you do. I love when you talk about the death threats. And, I just think if somebody tells you that there's one way, run away. Like I would just say that to everybody all the time. And when we're talking about such complex issues, like quitting a substance or managing a substance or reducing a substance, and I think that goes for the food too. Like it's really about what you're saying, which is the data says that self-determination is really the key. It's like finding something that resonates with you in the best part of yourself, in the core of yourself, and then trying that. I'm so fascinated by this thing that people are saying in my community these days, which I think is this side hustle cognitive dissonance gone crazy, which is it's too hard.
Mhm.
It's too hard. What do you think about that? I think the dissonance of that is fascinating, but maybe what we should explain to people first is what dissonance is. You do it so
Awesome.
well. I like
So
read your book and then I was like, I had my whole book outline, and then I read your book and I was like, oh, I got to add a chapter on dissonance. I wrote a whole
oh,
chapter 5 in my book is literally should be like dedicated to Annie Grace.
oh, that's so cool. I love your book. It was so great. I recommend it all the time.
Oh,
And
thank
I
you.
actually like lots of people are like, oh, you're talking
Oh,
about
we
it.
have like cross community. We should like have a sesh for all of our people. We have so much cross community. I know. I'm so grateful for you. You know, that's like good friends though, right? Because I've actually had I have so many patients and people I know that don't want to abstain from alcohol, are not ready to abstain from alcohol, have no interest in it. And I have watched your book change. It's so interesting. There's one patient, you should know this. There's one patient, she never, really, you see all the consequences, and the desire really, was there, wasn't there. And talk about, you can never put the toothpaste back in the tube. I mean, there's not a day that I've had a session with her since that like something from your book. Well, I went and then I thought about like, what's the purpose of me having this? And it's like, she's so thoughtful about her experience, her reduction, and her motivation and how she drinks now is like completely different.
Wow, that's so great.
It's so important to say, right? Like somebody tells you that there's one way, run away. I mean,
So
the
important.
12 steps, I swear by them. I think they're amazing, and they're not for everybody and they're for some people. And it's like, who knows? You never know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love to see the crossover too. I mean, I've seen posts where somebody has the big book and this naked mind, and they're like, this is my, and I think when we get out of the one way thing, then we can take what we need from lots of different ways. And for sure with my,
Annie, wouldn't America just be a different place if they this is, but I think this is kind of what's happening in the food and the alcohol. Like, I say, sugar's an addictive substance. And then the intuitive people are calling me a predator, it's like, and like, I'm not opposed to intuitive eating by any means. I mean, literally that was a tweet that somebody wrote to me, Molly Carmel's a predator. And I know it's a lot, but yeah, so I just think that there's this piece where it's interesting. Like we end up getting into a space where we guard what got us well, and then we're unable to see that if we integrate lots of ideas. I mean, that's how I created my treatment model. That's how you created your treatment model. I mean, it's like, this is what I wish people could really hear from all of us, which is lots of things work. And the dissonance of it's too hard is the thing that I think really gets people into what I call the abstinence violation effect, which is like the fuck it's, which is what you're talking about. Yeah. What do you call it?
The what the hell effect.
The what the hell effect, right? The abstinence violation effect, right? The F it's, the whole, which is just brings us back to self-hate. Like, what's the point?
Right. Yeah, it's so true. And I feel like for everything that I've been really successful with, there's never been a single teacher, right? Like everything from my spiritual life and reading all sorts of different texts to my meditation practice and reading everything from like all sorts, like transcendental and then mindfulness and then no meditation. Like there's never been a single teacher. It's been a lot of different things that I've brought into what works for me.
And Annie, I have chills all over my body over that. That like makes me want to cry. Anybody listening, this is your takeaway. Many teachers, like that's how you find your own path. That's all that matters because, people hear me, I abstain from sugar. That's what works for me. Like, I don't want it to be a different way. And then everyone's like, well, then that's what I have to do. What do you have for breakfast? That's what people say to me a lot.
Yeah.
What do you have for breakfast? I was like, who cares what I have for breakfast?
Right? Like
By the way, and perfect food is an eating disorder. Like I can't, exactly. One teacher is a cult. Got it. Damn.
Good.
Can we make a
So,
meme that says that? You should make a meme that says that.
yeah,
I'll give it to you. That's good. It's your line.
Then many teachers is wisdom. One teacher is a cult.
Is that like a prophecy? Like, or did you just make that up right now?
Oh, I just made it up. Let's hope it's true.
Stop
Otherwise
it.
we're gonna
That's a good one.
It feels true. Feels true to me in this moment.
Me too.
For sure.
Me too.
So cognitive dissonance, how I explain it is like, if you imagine that you're walking down the street and you see some people across the street and they're fighting, it's really going to bother you. I mean, most humans. And then imagine if you're in your own home and you're fighting with your partner or your kids or your dog, it doesn't matter. It's going to bother you. You're going to feel it emotionally. Cognitive dissonance is literally fighting with yourself, but we disregard it because it's like drum noise in the background. We don't even know the drums are going because they've always been there. And it's so incredibly painful. And it's having two opposing views and having an inner argument and just spending all of your time and effort and energy trying to convince yourself one way or another, should I drink? Should I not drink? Is now a good time? I'm drinking too much. You should stop drinking. No, I need it. I can't get through the day. It's too hard to stop drinking, and so it's too hard is, it's one of the voices inside your head. And it's just that, it's a voice. And again, to go back to that filter, which I think is just one of the best filters anybody can use in their life, is run that sentence through those two questions. How does that it's too hard make you feel, and how does it make you behave?
Yep.
And then if it doesn't make you feel like you want to feel, which I promise you that makes you feel horrific. If you're trying to do something, you're telling yourself it's too hard. Number one, whatever you're telling yourself about a future event, you made up. So you're making it up. Like, right? Like, so if you're telling yourself it's too hard, you're making that up.
You don't.
So, like,
I had this business advisor. He'd be like, Molly, do you know that that's true? Or do you think that that's true? And like every time I'd be like, I think it's true, Scott. I don't know it's true because it hasn't happened yet, like.
And so, and by saying it's too hard, not only are you making it up, but you are making it harder. And so if you run it through that filter, how does it make you feel and how does it make you behave? So the question is, okay, well, what do I think instead? Because I can't just think, well, it's easy, because all the evidence shows it's not easy.
And also that's like bypassing feelings, which is like just a reason to drink in and of itself and binge eat and all the things.
Yeah, if you try to force a belief into your mind that you don't actually believe is true, you create neurotoxicity, according to Dr. Caroline Leaf. Like, you actually create a problem in your brain by trying to force a belief that you don't believe is true. And I think we try to do that all the time. I think we don't know how to maybe like stop eating something or give up sugar. And so we tell ourselves no sugar is so, like, we make up these stories, like we demonize the substance, which is fine in some instances, but if you don't actually believe it's true, you're just creating more drama.
That's such a great, right. And if you're just trying to believe that it's true because you think you should, it's what a terrible use of time. I mean, and I've had people where I'm like, like where I think intuitive eating is a great path for them as a result of that, and then there's some people who are like, I need help and I want really specific help. And I think that somebody tells you that there's one way, run away, one size doesn't fit all. I love this idea that you talk about in, which I'm sure many people talk about, but you talk about it so beautifully, where the other piece is when you have all of this stuff going on in your head, the brain doesn't like things to be hard. And so the brain's like, you know what? I'm just going to go drink. So when there's all of the noise, the brain will always go to the easiest thing to do, which I think is such an important thing. It's why we need to balance our thoughts. I mean, that's that idea of thought balancing and cognitive behavioral therapy talks about, which is being able to soften it enough to be able to find solution or be able to live with it and work it out.
And I think in order to do that effectively, I really like to use, I'm sure many people probably teach this in many different ways. The way I teach it is with a literal step ladder and a graphic of a step ladder, and I call it ladder thinking. And so if you have, it's too hard is the thought you're starting out with, you've decided is making you feel and behave in a way that you don't want. And this is easy is a thought that you just can't believe. What are the ladder thoughts in between that? So maybe it's really hard right now, but it's getting easier. Or I believe this is really hard, but if I stick with it, it will be easier. Or maybe it's I'm learning how to make this easier than it is today.
Mm.
And any of those thoughts you can like practice, and all of those will make you feel better and give you more hope and motivation than just telling yourself it's too hard.
Yeah.
So it's just like, what's the rung on the ladder?
We are like, I could talk to you all day, and I have things I need to talk to you about, like trauma and like spirituality, and where that comes in for you when it comes to misusing substance, and where it comes in your thoughts, and where it comes in your beliefs of helping others. Like, I love what that Gabor mate says, not why trauma, why pain. And do you think that this thought process is enough to overcome the trauma that some people are drinking over or misusing substance over?
So I really like to compartmentalize our beliefs and our thoughts around using a substance into really three layers. So one is our thoughts about the substance. So for alcohol, this sounds like it tastes good, it relaxes me, etc. The second layer down is really the thoughts and beliefs that we have based on society. And these sound like I'm not going to fit in, I won't get invited, I'm going to be the odd man out, maybe even I won't. My partner and I, the foundation of our marriage is drinking, and so we're not going to be as close if we're not drinking. And then the innermost layer is our beliefs about ourselves.
Mhm.
And these sound like, I'm not strong enough to actually survive the day without getting drunk, or I'm not I don't feel sexy unless I'm drunk. And these are our beliefs about ourselves, our worthiness. And that's what, trauma informs those beliefs. And I think at that level, you need to handle and deal with and expose and get help for those
Trauma.
things.
I
Because
actually think trauma doesn't even have thoughts, to be honest. And I really, if you're listening, I want you to hear this, and I want you to hear me loud and clear, because I have tried to do behavioral thought balancing with trauma. And usually this response is, I don't know. Like, I don't know what happened. Right.
Mhm.
And then we think of the body keeps score, and we think trauma lives in the body. And this is such a
Yeah,
wonderful, responsible response. It makes my heart warm, what you're saying, which is, go, that's what I always say. We have to go deal with the trauma before we can deal with the food sometimes. Sometimes we don't
yeah,
have to. Sometimes we can integrate it
and we're
all.
not. This is the question: is like, well, why is it so easy? Why can some people just stop? You can read a book, pages on paper, words, and stop. And some people, they read the book 10 times and they
Yeah.
can't. And I'm like,
Yeah.
there's something else happening. There's something else going on that needs to be addressed at that
Or
level of self.
yeah, or they need, or like people need more support, like I love that. I mean, that's how I, I say that all the time to people in my, who are like an individual therapist. And I read your book. I'm like, well, sometimes the book don't work for everybody. And if you have
Yeah,
some deep, dark stuff, it deserves, I'm glad a book can't heal that, because it probably needs much more than a book can give you, or even a
yeah,
Facebook group, right? That's a beautiful
100%.
answer, Annie. Really warms my heart. Um, so what do you think we're really craving? What do you think's underneath all of it?
I do think connection is a big part of it. I mean, I think that connection to ourselves, and connection to others. And, I have a 3-year-old daughter, and all you have to do is look at her to see how intact her connection to herself is.
Mm,
She's she find her in a mirror and she's dancing and she's doing twirls and she's so like, it's you. I mean, she's so deeply connected with
yeah,
herself and with
yeah,
everybody around her. And I think that we spend so much time trying to learn how to self-love and try to learn how to do these things. And I think it's much more about removing the things that we have been put in place that keep us from that connection that we already have. I think we all have the ability to be deeply connected with ourselves very innately. We're born with it and with others. And then all of this stuff happens, all of these beliefs happen, all of these
yeah.
experiences happen, and we layer on distance. And so,
Well, I think, and we want to say this distance is both in physical, but also in emotional, in building these layers. And I, in the stories, and I'm sure you see this in your community stories, I see in my community, like everybody's clicked, and I can't be a part of that, or I'm not, I don't look like everybody else, and so I can't go do it, or and then those beliefs take on stories and lives of their own, and then we've just are convinced that we're unlovable all of a sudden.
mhm,
It's
yeah.
really crazy.
And I think that when what we're looking for, what we're really craving is that deep, intimate connection, both with ourselves and with other people, and with our surroundings, with our, with, spirit, with nature, with all of these things. It's that level of connection, but there's so many things that have been put in the way. And so the work of dismantling those things, of examining them and finding out if they're true, if they're serving you, is, I think, really important work.
Oh, I think it's the most important work. Do you think that there's a piece that you can do it while you are actively drinking? Do you think that they can happen concurrently?
I do. I mean, I feel like I've seen it all sorts of ways, right? Like I've
I
seen
would
people
agree with
who,
you. I would agree with you wholeheartedly with the food too. I would agree. Like, I don't, like, I believe that recovery, that's the words I use. I'm a 12-step person. I think recovery is as progressive, if not more, than relapse. I think, and I don't love any of that languaging because I don't believe in that judgmental language, but I think that that's the thing we undercut, is that our ability to rise is far stronger than that stupid falling we do, which you and I agree wholeheartedly is like, I have personally, in my relationship with food, I have learned more from the missteps that I've made about myself, about others, about my relationship with something bigger than me. And those are the moments that are the most pivotal in my own self-compassion, compassion of others, forgiveness of myself, and forgiveness of others across the board. I don't know how you feel about that.
yeah, totally. I mean, it's that that's there's more knowledge, there's more understanding, there's more growth in what we would classify as a mistake than there
Oof.
is in things going well. I mean, that's just fundamental how it works, right?
Well, and if you're really I mean, this is what I always think, like when they were making the vaccine, and they didn't do it right. They weren't like, oh, I'm such a failure. I can't do it. Forget it. We're shutting it. We're shutting down the study. They were like, well, what do you think went wrong? Okay, let's try this other thing. Could you imagine if we had a bunch of like self-hating scientists in there trying to create a vaccine? It's like, or any science study. They're not just like shutting down the clinic when they like make an error. I just wish we could be a little bit more scientific about, and because that's really where the self-compassion would come from too.
Yeah, I heard it said, and I think this rings true to me, but basically when a child is learning how to walk, it is the act of falling down and getting back up that creates the musculature that allows them to walk.
I love that so much. Yeah. And I think I think that the other thing people forget is, certainly we tell stories all the time. And for people who like look like they just got it, like even in your story, it's not that you just got it one day. It's like there's 15 years of, not getting it. Like that's my story too. One day I was like, okay, I'm done. Like this can't,
Right.
I'm just over it. I can't do this anymore. And sometimes that happens for people. And, sometimes it's somebody tells you that there's one way, run away. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
You are a wonderful human and a wonderful friend. And I am so happy to see you. I feel so connected. Thank you
Me
so much for
too.
coming
Thanks.
on today. Hey, what if people want to know more about you? I always want to know more about you, but like, where can we find you? Where can we hang with you, Annie?
Awesome. So if you're just curious about your drinking at all, I would recommend alcoholexperiment.com, which is like the free challenge. It's now in the App Store as well. Super exciting. And then if you want to know everything else is at thisnakedmind.com.
Yeah. And you're really lovely on Instagram. Where do we find that?
At This Naked Mind. And I have a podcast that Molly's been on, and it's This Naked Mind podcast.
That was fun too.
It's awesome.
I always have fun with you. All right. Well, thanks for coming on. Love you to bits. I'll see you soon, friend.